Love has been a mystery throughout human history. Poets, philosophers, and scientists have all tried to decipher why we fall in love, what attracts us to another person, and what invisible forces lead us to create deep connections. Today, we're going to analyze this question from a unique perspective, that of Sigmund Freud, one of the most influential psychoanalysts of all time. Freud didn't see love as a simple set of passing emotions or an attraction based on biology. For him, love was a mirror of our internal world, a reflection of what we lack and simultaneously what we most desire to find. According to Freud, people fall in love with you for only two reasons, but before discovering what these are, there's something you need to understand. Love is not an accident. We don't fall in love randomly. There exists a deep, almost unconscious pattern that dictates our choices and drives us towards certain people and not others. And this pattern has roots in the deepest parts of our psyche. Freud spoke about a fascinating concept, projection. According to him, when we meet someone and feel that instant, inexplicable attraction, what's really happening is that we're projecting aspects of our own unconscious onto that person. That is, we fall in love with something that, at some level, already exists within us but that we don't consciously recognize. Think about this. Have you ever felt attracted to someone who represents exactly what you'd like to be? Perhaps a self-assured person with impressive inner strength, or with a freedom that you feel you lack. It's no coincidence. Freud would say that what actually attracts you to that person is a repressed part of yourself that's desperately seeking to come to light. This brings us to the first reason why someone falls in love with you. Because you represent something that person doesn't have but desperately needs. Have you heard the phrase, opposites attract? Though it sounds cliched, there's psychological truth behind it. Freud believed that every human being has repressed desires and impulses that he called the ID, that primitive, pleasure-seeking part of our unconscious mind. The ID contains everything we repress, everything we don't want to accept about ourselves, but which, paradoxically, we seek in others. For example, a very rational person might fall madly in love with someone emotional and spontaneous. An introverted individual might feel an irresistible attraction to someone extroverted and social. What's actually happening is that this person represents something the other has repressed within themselves. It's as if our unconscious were saying, "There's what I'm missing." But this is only the first reason. There's a second one that's equally powerful and related to an even deeper concept within Freudian theory, the Oedipus and Electra complexes. According to Freud, within each man exists an internal image of the maternal figure that shapes his romantic attractions, and within each woman an internal image of the paternal figure that influences her romantic choices. These images form throughout life based on our experiences, especially in childhood. When we meet someone who embodies these parental characteristics, we feel an instant and irrational attraction. In other words, we fall in love. This means we fall in love because that person awakens something that already existed within our unconscious mind. They're not our soulmate as fairy tales would have it, but they resonate with a deep and unknown part of ourselves. Here lies the great irony of love. We don't fall in love with someone for who they truly are, but for what they represent to our psyche. But here a problem arises. If we fall in love with someone because we project a part of ourselves onto them, what happens when reality doesn't match the image we've created? This explains why many relationships that begin with burning passion end in disappointment. When the illusion of projection disappears, we realize the person we loved wasn't exactly as we imagined them. We discover their flaws, fears, weaknesses, and at that moment, we have two choices. Either accept the real person with all that implies, or reject them and continue searching for someone else who fits our idealized image. The problem is that many people never break this cycle. They move from one relationship to another, always looking for someone to fill their void, complete their repressed parts, perfectly fit the image they've constructed in their unconscious. Freud invites us to do something different. Instead of seeking in others what we lack, we should work on integrating these parts within ourselves. If you're shy and attracted to extroverts, perhaps it's time to develop your own confidence. If you fall in love with secure, independent people, ask yourself what aspects of your life make you feel dependent or insecure. Love, according to Freud, isn't finding someone who completes us, but discovering ourselves through our relationships. This leads us to a powerful conclusion. People fall in love with you for only two reasons. Either you represent something they lack, something they yearn for in their life, or you embody a parental figure that already existed within them. But ultimately, the real challenge isn't just falling in love, but maintaining love when illusions disappear. The next time you wonder why someone fell in love with you, think about this. Are you a reflection of what they lack, or a reminder of something that already existed within their unconscious? And more importantly, you fall in love for the same reasons. But love isn't just a matter of initial attraction. There's something much deeper at play, something Freud understood better than anyone: the concept of libido. According to Freud, human beings aren't born complete. We spend our lives trying to satisfy our primal urges, balancing our pleasure principle with reality, developing what we lack and understanding what we already have. And love, though it seems external, is actually a tool of our unconscious to accelerate that process. Think of it this way: each person who enters your life and leaves an emotional mark is, in a sense, a teacher. They show you something about yourself that you might not have discovered otherwise. They reflect your own insecurities, hidden fears, deepest desires. That's why Freud said that love can be both a transformative force and a dangerous trap. If you're not aware of your own projections, you might spend your whole life falling in love with illusions, chasing shadows, believing that love is something outside when it's always been within you. This is where many people make a mistake. They believe true love is finding someone who fulfills all their expectations, who perfectly fits their idea of the ideal partner. But in reality, the deepest love isn't one that fills voids, but one that helps you discover yourself. Look around you. Observe your past relationships, your most intense infatuations, the people who have awakened emotions in you that you couldn't control. What did they have in common? What part of you did they reflect? Because ultimately the big question isn't why people fall in love with you, but what that means for your own internal journey. Love has many layers. What we see on the surface, attraction, chemistry, connection, is just a small part of what's really happening at a psychological and emotional level. But if we want to understand why people fall in love with us and how our relationships work, we must go beyond the obvious. Freud gave us a fundamental key to understanding love from a deeper perspective: our primal instincts and early development. This means we not only seek in others what we lack, but consciously choose people who will help us confront our own wounds. Yes, you heard that right. Falling in love isn't just a matter of desire or compatibility. At a much deeper level, it's a mechanism that pushes us to confront our repressed traumas. Why do some people seem to repeat the same patterns in their relationships? Why does someone who experienced abandonment in childhood seem to attract partners who end up leaving? Why does someone afraid of vulnerability fall in love with people who demand intense emotional connection? The answer lies in what Freud called repetition compulsion. We all carry within us psychological wounds that formed in our earliest years. These wounds can manifest in many ways: fear of rejection, feeling not good enough, difficulty trusting others, and although we're often not conscious of them, they influence our romantic choices more than we'd like to admit. If someone falls in love with you, it's possible that at an unconscious level, you represent a key element in their process of working through past traumas. It might be that your way of being reminds them of something from their childhood, something their psyche is trying to resolve. Or their attraction to you might be related to a need to face a deep fear or insecurity. But here's the crucial point. The fact that someone falls in love with you for these reasons doesn't mean the relationship will be easy or even healthy. In fact, many of the most intense and passionate relationships are also those that can cause the most pain, precisely because they touch very deep wounds. Freud said that love is one of the most powerful paths to psychic transformation, which means that when two people fall in love, they'll inevitably face their own repressed desires. That's why many relationships that begin with overwhelming intensity end in chaos and conflict, because love brings out not only the best in us, but also what we prefer to keep hidden. Perhaps you've experienced this. At the beginning of a relationship, everything is perfect. You feel that person understands you in a way no one else has. But over time, conflicts arise, tensions, differences that seem impossible to reconcile. This isn't a coincidence. It's the way love forces us to evolve. And this is where many people fail. They confuse love with comfort, They believe a relationship should always be easy and problem-free. But real love, the love Freud described, isn't simply being with someone who makes us feel good. It's being with someone who challenges us to work through our deepest conflicts. That's why people fall in love with you not only because they project onto you what they lack, but also because somehow you're destined to help them see a part of themselves they need to confront. But this leads us to an even more important question. What happens when love isn't reciprocated? Here enters another aspect of love that's rarely analyzed in depth. The idea of the other as a reflection of our psychological destiny. For Freud, each person we interact with, especially those with whom we establish deep bonds, serves a purpose in our psychosexual development. It's no coincidence that certain people enter our lives at specific moments. Sometimes they're a mirror of who we are at that instant. Other times, they're a preview of what we might become. Imagine you cross paths with someone whose confidence and security dazzle you. You might feel an immediate attraction, as if that person had something you desire. What Freud would tell us is that this attraction isn't to the other person per se, but because deep down they're showing you a version of yourself that you haven't yet fully developed. The same happens with people who challenge us, who bring out the worst in us, who make us lose patience or feel vulnerable. These relationships, though uncomfortable, are equally important. Freud called this the process of confronting our repressed desires. Our repressed areas contain everything we've suppressed throughout our life: fears, hidden desires, insecurities, aspects of our personality we've learned to hide to be accepted by society. But when we fall in love, these repressed elements become active. This means that love isn't just an act of connecting with another human being, but also a process of self-exploration. If a relationship provokes intense emotions in you, positive or negative, it's because it's touching aspects of your unconscious that need to be integrated. That's why some relationships transform us completely. After them, we're never the same, because what's really changed isn't the other person but what we've discovered about ourselves. But there's something even more intriguing in Freud's theory. The idea that the people who impact us most in life don't appear randomly. He spoke about the concept of the unconscious mind, the idea that what seems like chance on the surface is actually driven by deeper psychological forces. Surely you've experienced something like this. Meeting someone at the exact moment you needed them most, feeling an immediate connection with someone who seems to have been waiting on your path. From Freud's perspective, these connections aren't simple coincidences. They're part of a process of working through our repressed desires. People fall in love with you because at some level, their unconscious minds are seeking an experience that only you can provide them. It might be a lesson, a transformation, the closing of a cycle. And you, in turn, also fall in love with people who are destined to teach you something about yourself. This leads us to a fascinating idea. What happens when someone enters our life, awakens intense emotions in us, and then disappears? If you've ever experienced a fleeting but unforgettable love, a deep connection that for some reason couldn't continue, then you've experienced the unconscious mind at its most powerful expression. Freud would say that this person wasn't meant to stay but to leave you a message, something you needed to learn at that moment in your life. And here is where many suffer, because most of us want love to be permanent, relationships to last forever. But Freud would remind us that the true purpose of love isn't permanence but growth. Some people stay with you your entire life. Others will appear just for an instant, but all leave a mark on your development. And this brings us to the next big question. If people fall in love with us because we represent something they need on their path, how can we be more conscious of this process? How can we use this knowledge to build more authentic and meaningful relationships? Love isn't just a reflection of who we are, but also of who we might become. In each person who enters our life, there's a hidden message, a clue about something our unconscious is trying to show us. Freud spoke about the importance of bringing unconscious material into conscious awareness, which is the path toward resolving our internal conflicts. To achieve this, we need to go through different phases of self-discovery, and relationships are one of the most powerful tools to accelerate this process. If you look closely, you'll notice that each love you've experienced has brought to light a different part of you. Perhaps one relationship taught you to be stronger, another showed you your capacity for giving, another forced you to face your deepest fears. But there's something even more intriguing. Not everyone who falls in love with you does so for the same reasons. Depending on the moment of your life, you'll attract different types of people. If you're in a period of growth, you'll likely attract someone who challenges you to go further. If you're in a phase of insecurity, you might attract someone who reinforces those fears, forcing you to confront them. This is where many people get confused. They believe relationships are simply coincidences, or that love is a matter of luck. But if you analyze your life carefully, you'll notice a pattern. The people who have appeared in your path have been reflections of your internal state. What you've attracted has been in tune with what your psyche needed to experience at that moment. That's why some relationships seem inevitable, almost as if they had been written somewhere before they occurred. It's not magic or destiny in a supernatural sense, but the manifestation of unconscious processes seeking resolution. When someone falls in love with you, they're not only seeing what you are on the surface, but what you represent at a deeper level. You might be an echo of their past, a symbol of their future, or an opportunity to face something they've been avoiding. But this also leads us to a fundamental aspect rarely analyzed: the fear of love. Why do some people feel intense attraction to someone but run away? Why are there those who seem incapable of maintaining a stable relationship, although they deeply desire love? Freud would give us a clear answer: the fear of confronting repressed desires. True love changes us, forces us to see parts of ourselves we perhaps don't want to face, puts us in situations of vulnerability, forces us to trust, to let go of control, to open ourselves to another person with no guarantee we won't be hurt. And many people, though not consciously aware, aren't ready for that kind of confrontation. That's why some relationships never materialize, even though the attraction is strong. That's why some people seem trapped in patterns of self-sabotage, pushing love away just when they're about to experience it in its most authentic form. The problem isn't a lack of love, but the fear of what love might provoke within us. And here another fascinating question arises. If love has the power to transform us, how can we learn to embrace it instead of fearing it? Fear of love isn't simply a superficial resistance. In many cases, it's a defense mechanism deeply rooted in the unconscious. Freud explained that the human psyche is composed of multiple layers, and one of the most influential in our life is the unconscious mind, that part of us we've repressed or denied over the years. When we fall in love, our repressed desires activate. We don't just see in the other what attracts us, but also what challenges us. And here is where many people experience a paradox. They desire love, but at the same time reject it because they fear what they might discover within themselves. This fear manifests in many ways. Some people develop a pattern of self-sabotage, pulling away just when the relationship begins to deepen. Others create unnecessary conflicts as an unconscious way to avoid real bonding. Then there are those who feel attracted to emotionally unavailable people, which allows them to experience desire without having to face real commitment. In all these cases, the problem isn't a lack of love, but the fear of what love might reveal, because love doesn't just unite us with another person. It also forces us to confront our own wounds. Freud explained that the only way to overcome these fears is through bringing unconscious material into conscious awareness. To achieve this, we must first recognize our own patterns. Ask yourself, why am I attracted to certain types of people? What kind of relationships have I repeated in my life? What emotions emerge when someone gets too close? It's difficult work because it means confronting our own wounds, but it's necessary if we want to experience authentic love. Many people seek love as a form of escape, hoping a relationship will help them fill an internal void. But true love doesn't work that way. Instead of filling voids, it exposes them. Instead of giving us immediate security, it challenges us to build it within ourselves. That's why people fall in love with us not just for who we are on the surface, but for the energy we project. If we're in a state of fear, we'll attract people who reinforce that fear. If we're in a process of growth, we'll attract people who help us continue evolving. This explains why some relationships seem to be lessons disguised as love. Some people come into our life not to stay but to teach us something essential. Others appear when we're ready for something deeper and more lasting. But here enters another key concept in Freudian theory: fixation at different stages of psychosexual development. According to Freud, Each human being goes through different developmental stages: oral, anal, phallic, latent, and genital, and the way we relate to others reflects our level of fixation or resolution at these stages. When a person hasn't resolved their conflicts at a particular stage, they tend to project them onto others. That is, they seek in their partner what they haven't developed in themselves. For example, a man who had a difficult relationship with his mother might seek maternal qualities in his partners. A woman with unresolved paternal issues might be attracted to authoritative, dominant men. The problem arises when these projections generate dependency. If a person deposits in their partner everything they haven't developed in themselves, the relationship becomes a kind of transaction where each depends on the other to feel complete. But this kind of love isn't authentic because it doesn't arise from integration but from deficiency. That's why Freud emphasized the importance of self-knowledge in relationships. The more conscious we are of our own psyche, the less we project onto others, and the freer we are to love without fear or dependency. But this leads us to another question. If love is a mirror of our psyche, how can we distinguish between a relationship based on projection and one based on authentic love? The difference lies in how the relationship makes us feel. If a relationship is based on projection, it generates anxiety, insecurity, and fear of loss. If it's based on authentic love, it generates growth and a sense of fulfillment that doesn't depend on the other but on what we've developed within ourselves. Many people confuse intensity with love. They believe a relationship full of emotional ups and downs is more real than a stable, peaceful one. But intensity without depth is just an illusion. Freud would teach us that true love isn't a roller coaster of extreme emotions, but a space of mutual transformation where both people can evolve without fear. This leads us to a fundamental truth. Love isn't something we find in another person. It's something we discover within ourselves. And the more we know ourselves, the more capable we are of attracting relationships that reflect our internal state. Because love isn't just a feeling, it's a process of awakening. People fall in love with us not just for what we are, but for what we represent in their own journey of self-discovery. And we, in turn, fall in love with those who help us see parts of ourselves we haven't yet recognized. It's a game of mirrors, a labyrinth of projections and learnings. If we observe carefully, we can see there are patterns in the way people come into our lives. It's not a matter of chance but of resonance. Freud spoke of the unconscious mind, the idea that behind seemingly random events, deeper psychological forces are at work. In terms of love, this means people don't appear in our path by chance. There's a reason behind each encounter, even if we don't understand it at the moment. For example, some people feel an instant connection with someone without having exchanged many words. It's as if they already knew each other from somewhere, though it's the first time they've met. This phenomenon can be explained from the standpoint of unconscious desires, those hidden drives and impulses that influence our perceptions and reactions. When two people meet and feel an immediate attraction, it's possible their unconscious minds have recognized something in the other before their conscious minds do. Perhaps there's a deep affinity between their repressed desires, or perhaps they've had similar experiences that have prepared them to meet at that moment. But the important thing is that not all intense connections are meant to last. Some people enter our life just to catalyze a change. They're like sparks that ignite a transformation, but once they serve their purpose, they fade away. This can be painful because the rational mind seeks stability and permanence. However, Freud would teach us that each relationship has a purpose, and clinging to something that has already fulfilled its cycle only generates suffering. Love, seen from Freud's perspective, is a phenomenon that goes far beyond superficial attraction. It's actually a process of transformation where each encounter with another person acts as a portal to a deeper understanding of ourselves. Some fall in love for reasons that seem obvious: physical appearance, charming personality, intelligence. But if we look more closely, we'll realize these reasons are just superficial layers of a much more complex attraction. Deep down, we fall in love because the other reflects something we need to integrate into our own psyche. But here's a dilemma. Not all people are prepared to integrate what love reveals to them. Some, when confronted with their own repressed desires, choose to pull away or sabotage the relationship. It's not uncommon for someone who yearns for freedom to end up choosing controlling partners, or for someone who fears loneliness to unconsciously seek relationships that make them feel abandoned. This happens because the unconscious doesn't necessarily seek what makes us happy but what feels familiar. If a person has grown up in an environment where love was tied to suffering, they might unconsciously repeat that same pattern in their adult life. Freud believed the first step to breaking these cycles is awareness. Once we recognize the patterns that have guided our romantic choices, we have the opportunity to transform them. But this requires courage because it means questioning deeply rooted beliefs and opening ourselves to new ways of experiencing love. In this process, many people discover that what they previously considered their ideal type was nothing more than a projection of their own deficiencies. They realize they aren't looking for someone to complete them, but to accompany them in their evolution. And when this happens, love stops being a game of dependency and becomes an experience of true connection. The next time you wonder why someone fell in love with you, consider whether you reflect something they lack or embody a figure already etched in their unconscious. And remember, all those who have loved you have seen in you something that resonates with their internal journey, a lesson they needed to learn, a mirror they needed to face, or a reminder of what they could become.